gotta go talk to her. We'll see you. Well, no, because I wasn't even in I didn't see her. Right. We came back and this game for a couple of months after
I'm going to There's good bathroom audience.
Right, I got
that woman with the jacket.
I'll see you tonight.
Today was my birthday. I don't. That's why it was really fun because to the point where she's beating me in such a aggressive way that at one point I wasn't sure if I was supposed to hold her hand. I didn't know her. So I let go, and she fell straight off on the floor. Very gracefully. Still slid. Okay, everybody, I have just one thing to say. Do not drop your partner. Do not do insults. Do not drop your We're kidding. I guess we have to talk about this. I'm excited to. Anything for the camera.
Baptized, they say your name is on the Lamb's Book of Life. So we're kind. The word that's used for us is the same word they use for livestock. Now, you know about Darwin and you know about okay, they're both colossal gods. But they are people.
I mean, there are more people, so.
Should we film it?
What? Yeah.
We're filming it.
Yeah. Do you want to come pick up a shrug?
What are we doing with it?
I thought they can't march.
You do it, Claire? Do you want to come pick up the dog? To identify who died. And they were so worried that the city would become sick with contagion with all the bodies that they had to bury them or burn them, Muslim and Hindu. Sometimes they didn't know, just to make sure that more people didn't die from contagion. It was a horrible disaster. The city wasn't prepared. The company turned off the safety alarm, so the people didn't even hear a warning. Carbide Corporation, now owned by Dow Chemical Company. You buy a company, as Dow bought Union Carbide in 2001, you buy its liabilities as well as its assets. You cannot walk away from the parts you don't like. You buy the whole package. But Dow says, we don't have anything to do with Bhopal. We don't have blood on our hands. We don't. We swear. But everybody here knows that that is not the case. You can write it on a piece of paper that you're not responsible, but 22,000 people are dead! And nobody is responsible? I'm sorry, that is not acceptable. We're not going to stand for it. Amnesty International is not going to stand for it. Association for India's Development is not going to stand for it, and that is why we're here today. I want to thank you all so much for coming out. We have a second target today because Dow Chemical cannot do their business without money. And State Street Bank is based in Boston. They're one of the largest banks in the world, and they're the number 5 shareholder for Dow stock. They own about 1/40 of the company, the largest chemical company in the country. And yet they say they have no responsibility, essentially, for voting on a simple shareholder resolution. It costs them no money to say we care about human rights in Bhopal. We know there's 22,000 people dead. And we want the company to at least look at this without any question of money. But they haven't taken this action. They've had many opportunities to do this. I called them, we emailed them, Amnesty faxed them before today. Said, you know that 10 to 15 people are dying in Bhopal every month, and there's something easy you can do. It doesn't cost you anything. We have no policy on resolutions such as this. That's what they said. Everybody has a responsibility to human rights, and if you're profiting from a company that's profiting so many deaths, you have a responsibility. If you're an owner of that company, you have a responsibility to protect human rights. To stand up so that more people don't die in Bhopal next month, as we know they will. So we're going to be marching to State Street Bank today after we hear from our guest Claire Allen, and asking them to do the right thing this year and vote for the Bhopal shareholder resolution, which simply asks the company, what have you done for the survivors? They don't want to answer that question because the answer is nothing. They haven't done anything. In fact, they bribe people to do fake cleanups in Bhopal, making people sick by sweeping the pesticides into the air and making people who have already been poisoned again. So that is why we're here today. Thank you so much for coming out. Carver's going to introduce our speaker.
As many of you know, there have been 22,000 dead, and the reason that we are so outraged is that this problem has happened on many different levels, and it's happened again and again and again. And it's happening right now because the site of this terrible hospital, who had been suffering from primary exposure to the gas, she died. Do you know why? Because their exhaled vapors were so strong that it killed her. She went as a This chemical company released this gas. It released tons of other chemicals because the explosion ripped apart the factory, and this site has not been cleaned up even today. Doesn't it make sense to everybody over here that this site should be cleaned up now? I also want to talk a bit about why this is relevant here, in the United States, in this city. I'm going to talk about 3 ways. One is the connection with labor. The other is the connection with the environmental problems that Dow has created within this country. And the third is about environmental racism. Many people don't know that before the company, before the Union Carbide plant actually exploded, there were 3 or 4 had to go to the hospital. And we have records from Union Carbide's internal documents showing that they did not follow safety standards. So this wasn't just some accident that happened to them that they suddenly were stuck with bills for. They were cutting corners in order to make money. Okay? There were several safety standards that they did not follow, and as a result, on 3 separate occasions, workers were exposed to poisonous chemicals, and they had to be taken to the hospital. Did worker safety matter to this company enough to revise their safety standards? No. When it was a death of a few workers, whatever, it could be swept under the carpet. When it actually, the whole plant exploded and killed 7,000 people overnight and 22,000 people to this day, suddenly, well, it still didn't matter to them because they haven't done anything about it, but it was a big embarrassment all of a sudden. My point is that workers get exposed to these conditions first. Right, very recently, one of the trucks carrying Dow company material exploded, and it was the people who were driving the truck who were exposed. Again, workers for the company. This is the connection with labor. Dow Chemicals, this incident that I mentioned with the truck exploding happened in the US. Dow Chemicals is responsible for the manufacturing of Agent Orange, which killed thousands of Vietnamese and veterans from the US military. I have friends who have been crippled, who were born to vets, who now show extensive lifelong mental health and physical complications as a result. So I have ties to this problem from several different angles. And I have friends and family in Bhopal right now who are exposed to that water. And within the US, dioxin contamination in Michigan has also killed people. Dow is not just a hazard in the rest of the world. Environmental racism is what happens when a disaster happens in India or to poor communities of color here and is ignored more than when it happens to affluent communities. So, for example, Dow did not, when it bought Union Carbide, it had other outstanding liabilities. And it set aside money for those, but it did not set aside money for this. Why, you may ask? This brings me to the introduction of our speaker, Claire Allen, who will be talking about environmental racism here today with another cause that should be important to all of us. Boston University has established a level 4 safety biolab. They did not choose to establish it in the area where Boston University actually is, but in the low-income community of Roxbury, which is primarily populated by people of color. This is what I call environmental racism. And we will hear more about it from Claire Allen, who is a community organizer and is part of the Roxbury Safety Net. She works on housing issues that affect low-income communities and communities of color.